Us now, the minority leader of the House of Delegates, David Toscano, the Paisano. Mr. Minority Leader, great to have you with us.
It's great to be with you, John. How you doing down there?
Doing fantastic here. We're up here in Richmond for the General Assembly. And by the way, I want to start with two things. Number one, it was great to finally meet your bride, Nancy, the other day, last week. You definitely married up.
I definitely did. Yep, 37 years. Pretty long time.
It is. You had a little bit longer than me. I also married way up. It's still people say, "Oh, John's a good salesperson." That was still the best sale I ever made. I still don't know how I did it
on the radio, and you'll be doing fine.
I know that was quite the sale I made there, a very long time ago. Some people say I sold the fraudulent bill of goods, but there's no return policy, she says. Right? She didn't buy the warranty either, so all that stuff going on. Now, let's get to what's important. Football, Super Bowl, coming up Sunday night. So far, I picked the Patriots. Chap Peterson picked the Patriots. David Marston picked the Patriots. McKeachin says Seattle. What say you?
Well, that's because he's got Russell Wilson in his backyard. I mean, he's got to pick Seattle.
Right, he doesn't have a choice.
He doesn't have a choice.
Right. So, what say you?
Pats.
Okay.
Tom Brady, big game. He probably thinks this might be his last shot at picking up another one. He's got to win. And they know what to do with the footballs too, so they'll be fine.
I know. I think this whole Deflategate thing is actually it actually plays into the whole Patriot mystique,
right?
And I think it's played right into their hands, and so the other thing is they're peaking right now. Seattle shouldn't be there. They never should have won that game 2 weeks ago. So I'm with you. I like New England, and I think they're going to win handily. The other thing is, if Seattle gets a lead, New England can come back. If New England has a lead, I just don't see Seattle if they're down 2 touchdowns. Even though they came back 2 weeks ago, that was a fluke. I just don't see it happening. So
it'll be a great game. I love Russell Wilson. I love to watch him. He's just an exciting guy. So
he is a good ball player,
yeah.
No doubt. Minority Leader, let's go to your thoughts on education. You're looking for bipartisan backing on education funding. It's an issue in the state. Can you kind of outline what your vision is?
Well, the first thing we're doing is trying to reform public education and trying to take some of the burden of the testing off the school divisions. One bill that passed yesterday, which I thought was really interesting, and in my area really make a huge difference. These schools have to be recertified every year, but it doesn't give any allowance for school divisions that are high-performing divisions. And in my neck of the woods, I've got Albemarle and Charlottesville, and they are high-performing divisions. And why should they have to go through the onerous task of having to get certified every year if they keep doing really well? So I think that bill's good. But, reform is nice, but ultimately you got to put some resources into the system. And, we've been neglecting education for a while now. Our spending per pupil is about what it was back in 2009. Our teachers, it got a small bump in salary a couple of years ago, but it's certainly not keeping up with inflation. We're trying to find some money, and now I think we might have a shot at it because the revenue picture is looking a little bit better. We might be able to find a little extra money to give teachers a raise, and I think they need a raise. Heck, all Americans need a raise. But we can help fund that, and I hope, and try to get it through.
What about the raise for all state employees? Where do we stand on
I think there's a shot at getting that too. Now, these are not going to be huge raises,
right?
But I think that if the revenue picture continues to be the way it is, I think there is some sentiment around here to try to find that money and allocate it there. Now, it's complicated by certain things too. If you don't reform how you spend in other areas, it's hard to find the money. We talked about we were talking about the coal tax credit yesterday, a couple days ago in the House, and the governor had a plan to reform some of those, the way those credits are allocated, and with the result of creating some extra dollars in the budget that we could use for public safety and teacher raises and state employee raises. Right now the House has defeated that, but clear how it's all going to come out in the end. A lot of things happen at the 11th hour around here, and so I don't want to give up until we leave this place.
No doubt that there's a real issue with some schools in Virginia, and I always tell the story that the particular school district that I'm in my area, I cannot send my child to that school. I have to send them to a Catholic school. I can't send them there. And so...
Yeah, and every single parent, every single year, has a debate and discussion about where to send their child to school.
That's right.
And, that discussion sometimes has to do with money, and sometimes has to do with safety. And there's a lot of things that enter into that decision. And, I respect the folks for any decision they make that's going to be best for their child. But you're right. If you feel like the child is not going to be safe at school, or the teachers aren't any good, or the curriculum is not any good, you want to look for options. After all, it's your child. And so what we got to make sure we do is to ask the schools who are having a hard time, we got to figure out a way to turn those schools around.
Right.
And, it's not always easy to do, but you got to put resources in there to do it, or it doesn't happen.
Right, because the difference is that in our situation, we were able to cut everything out that we possibly could cut out in order to fund them. But there's many other children in that school who's either maybe there's a single mom or dad, or they don't have private transportation, so they're locked in. They have no option. They can't get out, and the school is failing, and they're stuck there.
Yeah, and there's a cycle that occurs then.
Right.
As people start to remove their children from the schools, it only gets worse, for the school itself. So
right.
You got to try to turn these schools around at the first indication that they're having problems, and then in some school divisions, and we know of some primarily older cities in the Commonwealth, there's got to be a massive effort to really transform those schools.
What do you think of the A for F? The A
I
through
think it
F.
needs to go. When this first was posed as an idea, I thought, this is a pretty good idea. People will be able to determine it. But then you start digging deeper, and then you try to figure out what does it all mean, and what does it mean to give a school an F? And so I think a lot of folks down here have now decided, this maybe is not the right way to go. Instead, we've got to say, okay, this school needs help, whether it's a C school or an F school. This school needs help. We're going to try to give them some help, and it might be turnaround specialists that go into the school division and try to work with the teachers, or you might send different kind of teachers in there, or provide an incentive for certain teachers to work in those areas for a number of years and get a special stipend. Or, you might have to invest in the physical infrastructure of the school. And, of course, you got to work with the locals. I mean, the state can't do it. The locals on the ground have to do it, and they've got to do things not just in the schools. I mean, you got to do it in the neighborhood around the schools. So it's not like you can just wave a wand and somehow fix it. It takes a lot of effort at the state and local level.
Let's shift over a minute to something the House is going to be taking up today, the vote on a convention of states.
Oh, I love this. Well,
So,
this is a good debate that you and I can have, right? Is someone, I guess you would consider yourself a common sense conservative, and
yes.
I could consider myself more of a progressive.
Yes.
I have a lot of concerns about this. I mean, independent of what people might think about the intrusion of federal power, and I've got some concerns about that too. The Convention of the States, and I'm interested to see what you think about this, I think the Convention of the States is a recipe for a lot of uncertainty, and perhaps is really a direct attack on the Constitution itself. Because when the original conveners of the convention went to Philadelphia in 1787, they went there to modify and amend the Articles of Confederation. They didn't go there to destroy them. But when they got there, they destroyed them. And I think that's the worry that some of us have about a convention of the states, that it would be a runaway convention. And you get a lot of stuff that would happen that a lot of us wouldn't like. And that would be people on the left and the right. For example, one idea that's out there is that we ought to be able to override unpopular Supreme Supreme Court decisions by a 3/5 congressional vote. Think about that for a minute. Brown v. Board of Education. Very unpopular at the time, the desegregation of the schools in the United States. Mm-hmm. No more separate but equal. Very unpopular. That probably would have been overturned if this kind of provision had been in our Constitution. Can you imagine what this country would be like? And so that's just one of them, but you could also take, let's eliminate the Second Amendment. A lot of people like that, right? You've got the danger there that if you have a convention of the states, something like that might happen. And I think you're just playing with fire if you pass these resolutions.
Well, this might surprise you, but I agree with you 100%. I don't think it's a good idea because you don't know at the end of the day what you're going to end up with. And that's the problem. I believe in the sanctity of the U.S. Constitution. I believe there was some divine intervention with that, so I'm very reluctant to have people that are contemporary, that 90% of them I don't know and you don't know, going there and messing with it. And look, I was opposed to the Rights Amendment in the 70s, and I was in opposition as a very young man to a constitutional convention for that, and I feel the same way now. And I'll tell you the other thing, Mr. Minority Leader, that bothers me is whenever partisan politics comes into play, and you talk about changing the fundamental underpinnings of the U.S. Constitution because Republicans have a majority of state houses now, or Democrats already had a majority of state houses back in the 70s. I really think you're playing with matches.
Yeah, I agree, and that's right. People like Antonin Scalia, who is about as conservative as you can get on the Supreme Court, is really down to his toes about this, because it could be a runaway. Remember Ben Franklin's statement, when he came out of the Constitutional Convention. At the end of that convention, a lady came up to him and said, "Doctor, what did we create, a republic or a monarchy?" And Franklin said to the woman, "Madam, it's a republic if you can keep it."
That's right. That's at the end of the day, that's really what you have to remember. So, look, I'm certainly open to those that are advocating a convention of states and open to the argument as we continue the debate on, but instinctively, I just don't think it's a good idea. Mr. Minority Leader, I got a couple more minutes. The Tebow bill wins yesterday 57-41.
Right.
For those in opposition to this, I cannot help me understand those that vote no. What's the problem?
Well, I think the folks who vote no are concerned that you would have people using resources in the schools, but losing resources in the schools that might take away from people who are in the schools day and day. I think what's happening with this bill, it gets offered every year, and every year it comes out of the House stronger. I think that maybe the year gets passed, actually. And, at the end of the day, even though I voted against this bill, maybe it's not going to be as bad as the opponents have feared. And, I just don't know. I have concerns about folks just using the schools to pick and choose what they may want to have, because all taxpayers are paying for those schools.
Right.
But maybe this will work. We'll see.
Well, look, part of the argument is you've decided to homeschool your child, and I think that's, as you opened our conversation with, that's a very personal decision.
Mm-hmm.
In our family, that's just not something that my wife is interested in. I don't have the time, so we've chosen not to do that. We respect those that have chose to do that, and we fight for their option to be able to do that. Having said that, everybody's paying property taxes no matter what, whether you rent or buy or own. Property taxes is still going to support the school system. And if you really take the children and say, my primary objective is what's best for the kids. If somebody decides to homeschool their child and they want to play soccer, basketball, baseball, football, track, swimming, the opportunity not to participate in that, I just don't see how that benefits the children. And then we get caught up in the ideological argument about where the funding goes and who pays what. What about the child?
And that's one of the arguments for the bill. I mean, and the argument too. I mean, the homeschool kids get exposure to kids in the public schools all the time, and public school kids get exposure to the homeschool kids, and that might make for a better society. So you've got some arguments on both sides of the issue, and I think it probably will pass, and we'll just have to see how it works out.
I want to thank Minority Leader of the House of Delegates, David Toscano, for being with us. He represents the Charlottesville area. He has picked the Patriots along with me to win the Super Bowl. He's got some football acumen behind him, no question.